On this episode of Restore America, in Colorado, a husband and wife pair become the Pied Pipers for a slew of unwanted homes in need of repair. Also, a couple trade in their contemporary lifestyle to restore a classic century-old home in Maine. And Virginia officials search for someone to save an 1850s Petersburg home and find the perfect couple to rescue it. All this and more on this episode of Restore America. Hi, I'm Jeff Wilson. Welcome to Restore America. You know, when you hear the term search and rescue, you might think of a military unit like the Coast Guard heading out into dangerous seas to save people from a sinking ship. But in our first story, this term applies to a couple who are determined to search and rescue old homes in a rural Lafayette, Colorado neighborhood. They've done it not once, but 6 times in the last 5 years. Dana Coffield and Doug Conarroe didn't set out to be rescuers of old homes. It all started when a friend on the city council told Doug about a house that was scheduled for demolition. Doug and Dana had admired the house for years.
I was at work, the phone rings and it's Doug, and he said, hey, you know, if we could get that cool house on Baseline Road, would you move to Lafayette? And I said, oh yeah, thinking, oh yeah, that's gonna happen. And lo and behold, it had happened.
A local settler built this 1,800 square foot Queen Anne-style farmhouse in 1890. Doug enjoyed riding his bike by it as a kid, but now the house was in awful condition, and it was in the way of a new subdivision.
Well, we were talking on Mother's Day, and my mom was saying, I just kept thinking, you're insane, you're insane. So,
everybody says that. From the first project we took on, that it's a little bit of craziness involved with it.
An agreement was struck with the developer, but now the couple had to find a way to move the house. And equally important, find a piece of land to put it on. The clock was ticking.
As soon as the community found out that I was interested in moving it, a couple of different folks approached me and said, I have this piece of property, come and look at it and see what you think.
Doug and Dana purchased a piece of property that was only 1 mile away. But since getting it there provided some real challenges, the actual move would take about 5 hours.
We had to come up with a route to figure out the place that you were going to be less likely to run into power lines, less likely to have to shut down a state highway, you know, things like that. Because, you know, if it costs $5,000 to move each traffic light and you go through 20 traffic lights, you're in trouble. Your budget's blown.
You're obligated for damages when you move a house. If you poke a hole in the road or you knock a pole down, it's your project.
By devising a route through a field, they only had to pay for a couple of lines to be moved. Once the house reached its new home, Doug and Dana thought the worst was over. They were wrong.
A friend and I were up touring the upstairs, and the wind was blowing fairly hard, and the house was moving, and we're going, whoa, hold on here.
So the wind had actually racked the house sideways.
To straighten up the leaning house, they hired an excavator who nudged it back into place with the bucket of his tractor. Then the house framing was stabilized with bracing. The next step was putting the porches back onto the house since they'd been taken off to accommodate the move. Then a bit of a facelift on some shingles on the front of the house with a paint job to highlight the charm of the country Queen Anne style.
The house had been remodeled at some point, and they took out all of the long windows and replaced them with sort of 60s, 70s metal slider windows.
Doug and Dana replaced all of the inappropriate windows with the original style windows. On the inside, they had to pretty much start from scratch. Vandals and vagrants had abused the house before it was moved. It took over a year of intense restoration before the house was finished and they could move in, then sit back and appreciate what they've done. But they didn't have much of a chance to relax. They now had a reputation for moving and restoring old homes.
I believe the city contacted Doug because of the great job he did with the Thomas house to see if he might be interested in picking up the Cernage house, moving it, and restoring it. That was actually the beginning of historic preservation in Lafayette.
So they called you up and said, can you take this house, please? It was probably a pretty important public relations kind of thing for them because it was another historic house that a longtime family had lived in.
Doug and Dana rescued the Cernage house and moved it right next door to their house. They then restored the Miners Foursquare cottage and sold it to Jennifer Grant and her family.
We loved the idea of relocating a piece of history from Lafayette. We loved that this was an older home, and rather than tearing it down, that they wanted to bring it into a neighborhood and preserve that, and just knew they did great work and had always eyed their house and thought we wanted to get a piece of that. So we've been real pleased.
And the rescue effort didn't end there. Next came the Wanaka House, a home built by a dairy farmer around 1900. And where was this third house moved? Right next to the yellow Cernich house, which is right next to Doug and Dana's greenhouse. All three were moved about a mile from the city to make 3 rescues in a row. And after restoring this now red Wanaka house, Doug and Dana sold it to Beth and her family.
Doug and Dana have had a tremendous impact because they've really set a really great example that you can do a very functional, careful restoration of old homes and not be some sort of crazy project that takes 25 years.
Since these 3, Doug and Dana went on to restore 3 more houses in this Lafayette, Colorado neighborhood. That makes a total of 6, and along the way, they've learned a few things.
Well, you can always take your house with you if you want. That's kind of a manly man thing to say, oh, do you like this house? We'll just take it with us.
Take it with us. I think I learned not to be afraid. I mean, if there was a house to be afraid of fixing up, this was it, that's for sure. I mean, it was so awful. And that it turned out this nice, it's kind of cool.